Welcome to this episode of Maritime Software. My name's Callum Beaumont. I'm the host of the show and also the founder of the recruitment agency that powers the podcast. We're called Callum Beaumont, and we specialise in the kind of the maritime and supply chain and kind of trade, software and data arena, essentially finding kind of sales, marketing, product management, and typical kind of go-to-market type of hires. So today, I'm really excited to be joined by an old kind of contact of mine that I've known since my kind of broking days and things. It's Kate Bollanou. So Kate's has a really interesting background from shipbroking, spent time, obviously she's from Greece and from the Philippines, and spends a lot of her time and passion creating projects and courses associated with the well-being and the welfare of crews and seafarers. And kind of really helping businesses and ship owners, essentially trying to help that connectivity between ship and shore in terms of kind of creating cohesion between different cultures and diversity and inclusion. So we're going to talk all about that shortly, and we're going to discuss how technology can help improve that communication and that understanding of multicultural sort of crew and seafarers for different kind of fleets and things. So I hope you enjoy. Please do remember to follow the podcast on our different channels and subscribe to us on YouTube if you're one of our viewers. Really appreciate you tuning in each for each episode, and I look forward to catching up again soon. Thank you. Hi Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Hello there. Thank you for having me.
No, you're very welcome. I know we've been kind of speaking back and forth for years now, since your kind of broking days and things. So it's a real pleasure to see first of all, how well you've kind of come along and the journey you've been on since the broking time. So yeah, really excited to have you on the show today and to learn a bit more about your current project. So
thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome. And why don't you start by obviously introducing yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what sort of projects you're working on at the moment.
Absolutely. So my name is Kate. I am currently based in Athens, in my home country in Greece, and I'm an intercultural communication and behavior trainer for the maritime industry. Now, as you mentioned, my background is quite complex, and I've been in various positions and different industries as well. But my focus right now is helping organizations bridge the gaps that naturally exist because of the nature of our industry. So what I do is I provide either bespoke training programs or some kind of workshops or presentations to organizations that meet their challenges and their specific needs.
Excellent. No, and it sounds like, I mean, I can see obviously the courses you've been preparing and the different TED Talks and things you've got going on. I saw you featured as, I think, was it one of the top 100 influential kind of business startups, females in the world, or something I saw? Is that right?
There have been a couple of lists there, and I'm honored to be included, of course.
Brilliant. No, good. Okay, so you obviously you sounds like you've been in a number of different countries and lived in the different bases and things. So how did you first hear about shipping? Was it through family or some sort of introduction?
I think that's a very common, let's say, start in the Greek culture, having someone in the maritime industry within the family. So I had my stepfather and both of my siblings working in the industry, and I was actually the last one from the family to join.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yes, same for me. I probably would never have heard about shipbroking if it wasn't for my grandfather and my mum both being brokers and things. So it sort of naturally transitioned into that way myself. So yeah, I think that's very common, as you say, but really exciting to learn a bit more about the discussion today. And we're going to talk about how businesses can kind of manage kind of multicultural crew and shore-based personnel, and we're going to learn a bit from you about how best to kind of practices to streamline that, to make sure the different sort of cultures and different sort of personnel on board ships and shore are kind of their needs and wants and their mental well-being is kind of focused on, and people higher up in the food chain are a bit more kind of aware of things. So hopefully we'll dive into a lot around that sort of subject.
Yeah, I really like the word that you use, the phrase, the mental well-being. I think we do need to focus on that. So everything should lead to ensuring that maritime professionals, whether they're office-based or seafarers, are provided with a safe space.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think so from our angle on the tech recruitment side for shipping, I think the whole aspect of communication and connectivity is the big driver that can facilitate that kind of flow of information between the crew and the shore based team. So it's really interesting to have your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you tell us, before we kind of move on to that sort of subject, a bit more about your courses and how you're getting on with those? Because it's I know you sort of started up and it looks like you've been doing really well. So yeah, just share a bit more about those.
Absolutely. Okay, so in general, what I do is I offer bespoke programs to each organization. I do believe that each organization is unique and they do have, let's say, different challenges, different goals, and different dynamics within their teams. So my main focus is how can I develop something that meets every need of that organization. Now, I've developed a course, and that was let's say, the result of various or endless conversations that I've held with maritime stakeholders, because I identified specific challenges when it comes to having a diverse crew and having a diverse office-based personnel when they're working together. There are challenges that we need to identify and that we need to basically find solutions for, in order for people to perform better, to feel that they are included within an organization. And that was what I tried to develop with the course. So the course is provided online because we want people from every country to be able to attend, so it's not in person. And it's mostly for leaders, office-based leaders who either lead diverse groups or work with diverse groups. And when I say leaders, I think it's important to mention the fact that we need to have that experience of working and leading people who come from different cultures than us, because the challenges are different. As you understand, it's different when you are a team member and you have to collaborate with someone, and then different challenges arise when you actually have to be that person who motivates a group of people towards a common goal. So the training that I have developed is focused on the intercultural challenges that we face in the maritime industry. And we also cover the gender aspect and the generation aspect as well. This is because stakeholders have asked me to help them with bridging the gap that exists between generations. And we see that the younger generation has different values, different priorities. Basically, their needs are different. So how can we meet their needs so we can retain them within the company? And of course, in a way that also makes sense business-wise. So it needs to make sense for the organization. So it's basically ideal for people who are responsible for multicultural or multi-generational teams in a maritime organization. And I think it's really important to highlight the fact that it's not just beneficial for the actual participant of the program. It's also beneficial for the whole organization, because I developed it in a way that is very similar to a train-the-trainer training program. So they are being supported and provided with not only the theory of what we're talking about, but also with the tools that they need to have in order to spread that knowledge within the organization so they can train their own teams.
Excellent. And how are you getting that information from the actual crew themselves? Are you speaking to them when they're kind of on shore and they're kind of on leave, or is it you actually have chances to have, I don't know, Teams or Zoom calls with them while they're at sea? How's that kind of feedback been given to you? I appreciate it's probably been over the years of your experience, but is there any kind of particular tools you use or tech or approach that you have?
I would say it's a combination of, let's say, online forms of communication, whether that's a Zoom call with
Yeah.
someone in the company or a seafarer, whether that's an online survey that I actually ran last year to identify the challenges and the needs of the maritime organizations. And then I actually love in-person meetings. I love talking to people in person. So I always try to connect with people when I meet them somewhere, let's say in a conference. I do try to understand them. And I think it does make a big difference when someone approaches you in person and they see that you're another person as well. So you're not just the person that posts on LinkedIn or that, I don't know, creates a training program, because they need to understand and they need to feel that you see them as an individual, you see them as a person, and you're trying to really understand what their problems are, because it's different to, let's say, write a post and then post it on LinkedIn and people read it, and different to see that, you know what, people actually care, whether that's me or whether that's someone from their organization. So the answers that I get or the feedback that I get is from online interactions, but I always focus on the in-person interaction. I do see that people feel more comfortable when they meet me in person, and they feel safe as well to open up. So it's nothing, let's say, it's not a recorded interview or it's not an online survey, because there's always this fear of where will this end up. So they always have that fear, like, I don't want to say something as an employee and maybe it can harm my relationship with my employer. So people do open up a little bit easier when they meet me in person.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you sometimes speak to, say, the crew manager that almost speaks for their team, essentially, or is it more so you speak to the actual individuals themselves, or a mixture of both? I perhaps imagine.
Both, but if I can think about the percentage, I would say a larger percentage are my conversations with the actual stakeholders, with the managers, and
Yeah, that
that's
makes sense.
where we face different issues there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that makes sense, and because we'll get onto this in a moment, but that they may not have necessarily the full picture of what is really happening. So interesting. Okay, really good. So yeah, that sounds really exciting about the courses, and I'll ask you at the end just how people can kind of obviously find a bit more information and look that up. But how would you, talking about technology again? How would you say, or how do you feel technology has advanced kind of the intercultural communication across kind of the sea and shore from what you're seeing?
Well, I think that technology has definitely impacted in a positive way the relationship and the communication, both amongst, let's say, multicultural employees and between office and vessel. Just the fact that we do have access almost all the times instantly to the internet, and I know that doesn't apply on board the vessel, but the fact that we have instant access to so much information can actually help make the relationships and the communication and the collaboration, I think, more effective. For example, if we have a question or something that troubles us, we can just Google it and we can find the answer. We have translations, like I can translate something instantly and just copy and paste it. For example, it was Chinese New Year quite recently, and my sister-in-law is from China, so I didn't know what the appropriate wish is. So I just Googled it and I just copied and pasted the wish in Chinese, and I sent it to her.
Kai Fong, I remember we send that out as well, something along those lines.
So I couldn't pronounce it, so I just copy and pasted. So I chose the easy way, and I asked her then, "Is that correct?" And said, "Yes, absolutely." So we can see that the, let's say, challenges in communication that existed a few years ago can now be eliminated through technology. Of course, we have to have the will, right? Like, one has to care enough to actually take that step, because it might be easy for some of us, but for some others, it might not be as easy to do so.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it all ties back to better connectivity, so people can reach out to their loved ones as well, and be in
Mm-hmm.
better contact with the shore. It seems it will ultimately improve the well-being of the crew. And I imagine if the crew are probably choosing maybe to go on certain voyages if they know a certain ship owner puts more emphasis and investment in better connectivity and things. I would have thought.
Absolutely. Actually, this is one of the main requirements nowadays. Like when they survey people, what do you want in order to work for a company or to stay in a company for a longer time? And one of the top answers is usually connection, internet
Hmm.
connection. And of course, the second is whether that's free or not. But connectivity with their families, with their loved ones, is one of their main priorities nowadays.
I never thought that. I never thought they would have to pay for. I mean, obviously you pay for the phone call. So I never thought they might have to pay for. Crew might have to pay for internet. I
Mm-hmm.
guess it makes sense. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So what? Moving on. So what would you say the common barriers that typically kind of block or stop kind of cohesive values and communication across the sort of shore and sort of mariners on board vessels?
That's a good question, because it's something that I notice happening. I would say it's the lack of understanding from both sides. Obviously, when we have teams working within an organization, there are different departments and different, let's say, goals or different KPIs for every team and every team member, obviously. But we need to understand that when we're working for an organization, we should all be on the same page because we're working towards a common goal. And that's where the company culture comes in. Whether that's with their vision and mission, whether that's with different statements that they may have, they need to be able to communicate those effectively amongst their employees, regardless of their department or regardless of their location. It has to have an effective communication strategy in order for all people to understand that they're working together. So one of the main obstacles is that the lack of understanding. Now, whether that's because people may not always have experience in all departments, and actually that's the most difficult part to be, let's say, a
Hmm.
seafarer, but also have the experience working in the office. So, for example, for office-based employees, sometimes they do not understand the challenges that seafarers face and how difficult or how stressful it can be on board a vessel. Of course, they hear about it. Of course, they read about it, maybe in the email communication or in reports. But it's really, really different than experiencing it yourself or a loved one. Let's say if you had a family member and you were the person waiting for them, because that was my experience with my stepfather being away, and that was many years ago when connectivity was not even close to what we have right now, and he would leave for many months and we would never see him during that voyage, so there were no voice calls or anything like this. And then from the seafarer side as well, the lack of understanding of the pressures or the targets that the office personnel have.
Yeah.
So that lack of understanding of each other and creates lack of empathy, and that creates a big gap that we see. And one of the, let's say, main complaints that I receive from seafarers saying the office people don't understand us, they don't understand how stressful it is. And then the office personnel tell me exactly the same for the seafarers, saying like, they're only concerned with one vessel, but we have so many vessels to deal with and so many
Hmm.
seafarers. So we need to be able to, first of all, accept the fact that there are challenges from both sides and find ways that we can bring them together. We can bridge that gap and we can bring them on the same page.
Yeah, and that ties me on nicely to the next point about, are there any particular best practice you can think of that you've seen this become successful in terms of kind of managing those different cultures and expectations and nuances of different people from different regions, essentially?
Yeah, I've worked with a couple of organizations that have strategies in place that we've seen that they have worked really well. So basically, they appoint a group of people, let's say they put together a team, an internal team, and they act like the brokers between the office and the vessel. So that team that has been appointed needs to go through a specific training. So they need to be aware and very familiar, of course, with the company culture. So what do they stand for? What are their goals? What is acceptable and expected within that company specifically? So they're very familiar with that. And then we go into more specific training so they are able to support both sides, both the office-based employees, but also the seafarers. So they need to be familiar with the issues that those two teams will approach them for. So they are given the knowledge and the tools to support them. That's a big project, but we've seen with the organization that I've partnered with that when it is structured well and we put components of, let's say, practical issues that they might face, so hard skills that they need training for from the internal managers, but also soft skills, because we see that soft skills are very important for the organization and the advancement of their employees. When these teams are equipped with the knowledge and the tools that enable them to support the whole organization, we see that these, let's say, people acting as brokers can actually help bridge that gap that exists between different generations, different cultures, or between office and vessels.
That's really interesting. And do you think that could be a great career path for someone that's maybe a retired seafarer or someone a bit later in their career that maybe doesn't want to go into a sales role or something along those lines and has so much knowledge and insight? It's a really good avenue.
Absolutely, because they can actually leverage the knowledge and the experience that they have, and they can be the ones that can say, you know what, I am experiencing that, not just in theory, but in actual experience, because I have sailed on board the vessel, but I also understand what's going on in the organization. So I'm here to help. I'm here to, let's say, listen to both sides, but and also transfer the messages from one to the other.
Yeah, that's great. I hadn't heard of that sort of. I'm sure it happens, but just something you kind of maybe not aware of until you start digging a little bit into the subject.
I do hope, actually, because it's an internal project, so it's within an organization. So I do hope more organizations adopt a strategy like this, because it is important to bridge the gaps, to eliminate any, let's say, challenge or misunderstanding that may happen.
Yeah, I kind of just in my world, you kind of think the head of crew, the crew managers that are based on the shore, kind of facilitating that type of dialogue, but maybe sometimes it isn't always the case. I'm not sure. Okay.
Yeah, you're right, because it is part of their job, right? But sometimes we see that they are so busy with operational aspects of their job that there is a need to appoint specific people whose main role is to basically deal with these issues.
Yeah. And I guess part of that is going to be tackling other areas, which I know you've spoken about. I've seen in your different articles and presentations you've done around the idea of kind of diversity and inclusion, with obviously a whole range of different nationals and things. So, what advice would you give to leaders, or are you giving to leaders around the sort of the inclusion piece at the moment?
Right. I'm glad that you mentioned it, and actually, this is something that I keep repeating myself on it, but I do think it's important. I did mention it in that TEDx talk that creating a diverse team is a great start, but it is not enough. We need to be able to create that sense of safety, that sense of inclusion within our teams. Because imagine if you have a diverse team, which is very normal and expected within our industry. So we have a multicultural team, right? But what if one or more than one of the team members do not feel that they are valued equally? What if they feel that they are not respected as much as their colleagues? Then diversity is not enough, right? We need to ensure that we embrace all of our team members, that regardless of where they come from, regardless of their gender, their generation, regardless of their background or any other aspect of their identity, we can actually embrace them, we can include them and make them feel welcome. It's really important to feel welcome, not just part of the team because we were hired by someone in the company, but we are welcomed by our seniors and by our colleagues. So we need to focus on inclusion, not just diversity. I think diversity in the maritime industry comes very naturally. So whether we like it or not, our teams are always diverse.
Yeah, and if there is any kind of I don't know, events that take place on board the vessel or issues that people are having, let's say for example, I mean they may not be communicated to the shore as we kind of alluded to throughout the whole piece.
Yes.
So it's a case of having that channel, I guess, of communication and almost like not a ticket system, but like a way of raising an issue to someone or a designated person within your team to go to. And I'm sure they do have that, but I guess maybe some cases they don't as much.
You know what's happening? Most companies do have a system in place. So whether that's reporting something confidentially, calling the DPA, or calling someone that's short, or even going to the captain, right, when you're aboard your vessel. But I think one of the main challenges that we face in the industry, or in my work, let's get more specific. One of the main challenges that I face when I speak to stakeholders in an organization is that they are not always aware of the challenges that exist amongst the seafarers or amongst their employees, because people believe or feel that something is not important enough to be reported. So these moments, because we say that discrimination happens in those tiny moments of our daily life, the microaggressions that we call them, like a comment, a joke, something in the behavior, which is not as big as people might think, that's worth reporting. So these micro moments will shape the way that people feel, will shape the environment of whether someone will say, okay, it's a safe environment, or it's a safe culture as we try to create. So these micro moments, that microaggressions, usually do not reach the higher, the senior people. So when I talk to stakeholders and let's say we start discussing about the issues that they face within the organization, a lot of times I see that they are not aware of the challenges that their people are facing. So their responses are different than the responses that the seafarers or their office personnel will report to me. And that's because they are not being reported officially to their seniors. So there is a gap there as well that we're trying to cover and make people understand that if it bothers you, it's worth not reporting, but it's worth mentioning so we can tackle it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how about, I might be off topic here, but how about like with from the charterer's perspective, like if there's demands from charterers and maybe they're not quite reasonable, depending on obviously what type of voyage they've got and fixtures and things, do they have much understanding of what life is? I mean, sure they do, but what's the kind of seafarer's kind of relationship with a charterer or someone that wants to cargoes from quicker, all that sort of stuff? Does that impact what we're talking about today in terms of their inclusion and well-being and that type of thing? Does it have a factor, or is it mainly that's kind of managed by the ship owner, depending on what type of charter they've got, really?
I haven't seen any connection with between the charterers and let's say the crew members, because they have a different goal and they have a different, let's say, job to perform. So when we are looking into, let's say, diversity and inclusion, when we're talking about how to maximize the productivity of the seafarers and how to make them feel that psychological safety that we're aiming for, it's usually down to the ship owner, it's usually down to the money agent, and not so much to the charter, because again, their goals are different. So
Yeah.
it's not something that they would prioritize.
But they could. You could be a big BP or Shell or something, or Trafigura or whatever, and you could, like on the ESG side or something. Like when we get vetted, we apply for tenders to be recruiters for big companies and things, and they ask us what's our diversity inclusion policies and who's our point of contact regarding sustainability, that type of thing. So charterers could say to ship owners, okay, so what's your policy regarding crew welfare, well-being? Who's the point of contact for that sort of stuff? And maybe they do. I don't know if that's an avenue they would consider if they're not already.
That's interesting, actually, and I'm not quite sure whether that exists within, let's say, an organization. But that's a good approach as well, in order to embrace equality, because one of the steps in a strategy when we're creating, let's say, a truly diverse and inclusive environment for a company, one of the strategies is, and it's one of the last steps actually, to have that criteria for the external contractors and the partners and the organization that we partner with to have those, let's say, standards to check whether they are also diverse, they are also prioritizing inclusion. So that's a very good point that you mentioned.
Thank you. Yeah, completely out of the blue. But yeah, I just think it makes sense. But then I guess obviously the charterer ultimately wants to, move their cargo effectively and safely as possible. But I could see that happening perhaps as things develop in time.
There is industry pressure, right, in a positive way for people for organizations, not just people, to be more inclusive, to also check their sustainability goals. So there is pressure in the industry to have those standards. So we're moving towards the right direction.
Yeah, good. Okay, so I think we covered a lot. It's really interesting and definitely something, the more I dive into it, the more I kind of want to know about. So it's good. So I'll follow you, obviously, your discussions you have online and things. And last question before I kind of talk about you, a bit more about you rather than the sort of courses and things. But with regards to technology, obviously there's language barriers and things between crew and shore and even, I guess, maybe senior managers and things. How is technology helping those language barriers, do you think?
I think it goes back to the question that we discussed earlier. The fact that we have, almost in all cases, instant access to so much knowledge can help with the language, let's say, challenge that we may have. Of course, we should not rely 100% on technology, because we need to understand that whether we are sending an email, whether we have a call with someone, there is another person behind that screen or behind that phone call, right? So we need to understand that, yes, technology can help us close or make those gaps smaller, but we need to put that effort as individuals and not rely 100% there. So although, let's say, in the maritime industry and actually in any industry, we know that English is the spoken language, and we do take it as granted that most people will be able to communicate in English. We also need to be aware that we might speak a different version of English, whether we are native speakers or not. So, for example, for native speakers, I'm sure you know as well that, for example, British and American English is different. The phrases that we use, the idioms that we use, the way that we express ourselves is different. And it becomes more challenging when it comes to people whose first language is not English, like myself. Like, regardless or no matter how fluent we might think we are, we do tend to think differently. I know that, it can differ from person to person, but for example, my first language is Greek, and I find myself many times thinking in Greek and then translating it into English. And sometimes what I say in English might make zero sense. And I'm like, okay, let me say that again. Let me rephrase. So although, yes, we do see that, people do speak English in the maritime industry, not everyone has the same level of fluency, and not everyone expresses themselves in the same way. So yes, we need to also acknowledge that there are language challenges, and we need to also look into the emotional impact of those challenges. Like sometimes we do feel more conscious, and that might stress that individual more. So when they try to express something, whether that's because they don't feel very confident in their fluency in English, or they don't feel very confident in speaking up in a second language to someone who's more senior than them, that can actually create a very big challenge in terms of communication amongst different nationals. So going back to your question, technology will help a lot when we have access to it, and translations as well. But we need to raise our, let's say, we need to enhance our intercultural skills so we understand the other people and we also empathize with them. So whether we understand them or not, we need to be able to put ourselves in their position and to be more patient, basically.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said about the obviously English being the main kind of language of shipping, and I guess if that's even back and forth emails between operators and the captain and crew, if that's all in English, and you've, I don't know, maybe got a Ukrainian captain or something that maybe not speak English and stuff, it must be very tricky at times.
It is, yeah.
I guess you have good translation tools there, or maybe investment in spending time in educating them in certain languages and things, perhaps.
And actually, now that you're mentioning for the email writing, this is actually a project that I partnered with a company in Cyprus with. So we developed a course that went in their learning management system, and was professional email writing for seafarers, because that was a need that we identified within the organization. And we saw that things, again, that we might take for granted, like people who are used to using email in their daily communication, may not be something that, let's say, seafarers are familiar with. So we had to create something that would be simple enough that they could put it into action. And if we take into consideration the cultural aspect of email writing, we are able to notice differences in the way that we communicate in our emails, depending on where we come from. So, for example, and that's something, a common challenge that is being reported to me when I'm talking with stakeholders. For example, let's take the two cultures that I belong to, the Greeks and the Filipinos. Like, Greeks might tell me, you know what, first of all, Greeks write really long emails. So sometimes in English, they do not make sense. So we need to put full stops and separate those sentences that we elongate a lot. So one of the main challenges for email writing is that Greeks might tell me, you know what, we email our Filipino counterparts and we ask them something and it's quite urgent and they do not respond to us. So I need to explain to them, well, it's different communication style. So for example, Filipinos, if they do not know the answer, they might start trying to find the answer, but they will not communicate that. While Greeks expect, let's say, an email acknowledging receipt, saying, okay, I received that, I don't have the answer yet, let me look into that and I'll come back to you. But Filipinos, if they don't have the answer, they just won't respond until they have the answer. So you can see how misunderstandings and miscommunication can happen there, even in the written word.
Yeah, no, fascinating. Same in my world. Like if a client or a candidate send you an email and you don't know to do the answer, you need to at least acknowledge it so that they're not thinking, oh, well, he's not replying, I'll go somewhere else or something. You never know. So it's really important. And we have clients that are all based all around the world and they have different expectations and things. So I can definitely relate to that. Okay, so is there anything that maybe we haven't talked about or discussed on this kind of topic of intercultural kind of communication between ship and shore that you'd like to sort of add in, or do you feel like we've covered most of the areas you wanted to discuss?
Good question. I think it's important to mention the need of understanding how different cultures also behave. So when we're talking about intercultural skills, it's not just the theory, it's not just how we communicate, how we talk to each other, but it's also how we behave. Because sometimes we can create, let's say, that environment that we want to belong to with our actions. So if someone is fluent, or maybe in some cases they're not fluent in English, their actions will speak more than their words, right? So we need to be able to also educate our teams and ourselves on what is considered respectful behavior within a specific culture, right? I'll mention again another example from my two cultures, the Greeks and the Filipinos. So what is right is completely subjective, and it really depends on what we have been taught by our culture. So let's talk about eye contact. In Greece, we do maintain eye contact. This is what is considered to be respectful. So when someone, especially at work, talks to us, and especially when they're more senior than us, we need to be able to maintain eye contact because that shows that we respect them, we are listening to them, we are paying attention. Now, the opposite happens in the Philippines, where eye contact or long eye contact is not something that is encouraged. And I noticed that a couple of years ago when I went to Manila for a conference, the Crew Connect conference in Manila. And I was talking to some Filipinos and they were actually not looking at me. So they were close to me because their, let's say, their personal space is smaller in general. So they were close to me, but what they were doing was that they were looking at the floor, but they were pointing their ear towards me. So for them, that is how they showed me that they were paying attention to me, but they were also respectful at the same time by not looking in my eyes all the time, but also actually looking down and putting their ear towards me. So it's a completely different, let's say, expectation of what is considered respectful. So if, for example, in the Greek, it makes sense for their culture, right?
Yeah, I'm just going to say because I have so Mika in my team, she's in the Philippines, and she's been working with us for nearly 2 years now, and we've had 3 different people based in the Philippines working for us on our kind of executive search type of projects. And now it makes sense why they maybe wouldn't look at me. So I thought I was just scaring them or something. But no, that makes sense.
It's a sign of respect there.
Okay,
so
good.
What is considered right in its culture is completely subjective. So we need to be aware of these differences as well. It's not just the theory that one may read about, let's say, Greeks or British people or Filipinos. It's not just that. It's about really understanding, okay, how should I adjust my communication and my behavior in order to be appropriate in a different cultural context?
Yeah. And I guess it's learning those differences between cultures and things. And I guess when you're in business and things, you get that from experience or reading and things. So it's something I'm doing as well all the time, trying to kind of keep an eye out. Different managers like different things from in different countries, and their sense of humor is very different and everything.
Absolutely.
So you try and adapt.
Absolutely.
Good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kate. This has really been, definitely a discussion I want to kind of listen back to and kind of go into a bit more, see what we can pick up from it. But as far as on your side, I'd love to learn a bit more about you, kind of what you like to do, kind of day in, day out, kind of hobbies wise, that type of thing. When you're not, I imagine, traveling quite regularly for the projects you're working on.
Okay, so that's the personal side, I would say. To be honest, I don't have a lot of free time because I have 2 young daughters, so they keep me very busy, I must say. So I do try to work around their schedule. Also, my husband's schedule involves a lot of traveling, so that means that I need to accommodate for everyone's needs, so for all the 4 of us. So in general, what I tend to do is, of course, one big portion of my day is work. That's in the morning, but I really love reading. So when I have some time, whether that's in the evening or whether that's in the morning, if I don't have, let's say, a call or a delivery, I do find myself reading all the time. And actually, every single year I say, okay, I'm not going to do anything new this year. I'm not going to find a new training. But I do end up enrolling in a training every single year. Right now, I'm completing a certificate for global dexterity, which basically enables us to help our clients adjust their, let's say, behavior in different cultural contexts, and so for specific situations, but without losing themselves. So I think that's very important because I also faced that when I moved to England, that I found myself that I had to adapt and adjust more. But I felt a little bit resentful. Like, why do I have to change who I am and pretend that I am something different than I truly am? So this training program enables us to have the tools again and the knowledge on doing that. So I would consider that as part of my hobbies, although I do try to stop it, in the end, it serves me well. So if I'm not busy with the kids and with delivery, I do find myself reading a lot. And something that I try to be consistent with is working out. I see a big difference in physically and mentally when I am consistent with going to the gym, with my appointments with the gym.
Good. No, well, it's great. I mean, you obviously have lots of projects on the go, and I'm kind of similar. I struggle to focus sometimes. You have all these different ideas and projects. You think, well, I really should be just putting my time into that. Maybe leave that one for a little bit. And I've got 2 kids and 3 dogs, and it's just time is just non-existent unless you carve it out. So I understand. So it's great that you're managing to keep on the healthy side and things as well. So it's really good.
I need to keep up with them. They're so fast. They're so active. I'm like, I need to keep my game up.
Excellent. Good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really, really enjoyed this conversation. And of course, if someone wants to learn a bit more about obviously your views and your courses, or just to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do so?
LinkedIn, definitely. You will always find me on LinkedIn. So that's my main platform. It's always updated. So if I have a new project or anything new that I would like to share with within the industry, it's always LinkedIn. So they can find me with my name, Kate Bollanou. It's quite straightforward. And all the news that I have there, or all the announcements will be there. So thank you so much for having me as well. It has been a pleasure.